And we're back with Jeremy Kappell, meteorologist here in the Louisville area. So excited to have him as part of our show. This is a chance we get to ask all the deep dive questions into weather in southern Indiana. And of course, as if you've lived here for more than 5 minutes, you know the weather does not stay the same. So it kind of works out if you love all the seasons because you're going to get it here at basically just south of Indianapolis, just north of Louisville, points in between. You are not a stranger to this concept of changing weather. With that, though, Jeremy, being from the area, a lot of times people say, well, is there an imaginary line? Like, how come Scott County gets this or how come Jackson County gets this? And it does seem to cut off and follow these paths. Can you speak to that? Is there a science with it?
Yeah, there actually is. And there's a few factors that really determine the placement of snow bands, ice bands, rain in the wintertime. Then oftentimes severe weather will follow certain trajectories. You look at historical tornado paths, and it's like a lot of them are very similar. Why are they, lining up where they do? And it has to do some with geography. Some of it has to do with the topography of southern Indiana. Here in Seymour, it's very flat. You go a little further south, you begin to hit the ridging of the southern Indiana knobs, and you get a little bit of terrain. Oftentimes, weather patterns will follow that terrain because the height of clouds determined oftentimes what will fall underneath them.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so that's part of it. Another thing that plays into a factor is the positioning and the tracks of low pressure systems. Typically, all else being equal, they'll move from southwest to northeast. All else being equal. Now, you do have cases where they're moving in from the west or even northwest, and it'll dive southeast. Occasionally, you'll get one that starts south of you and will run north. But overall, the vast majority of them want to follow a southwest to northeast track. And that means a lot of those storm tracks look very similar.
Well, speaking of storm tracks, I know you've spent a lot of time studying and dealing with a lot of us around here remember the Henryville tornadoes back in 2012. So let's talk about that storm system and the paths and how it kind of mimicked some of the other storms that you studied extensively.
Yeah, the Henryville storm, very classic setup. We knew days and days in advance that March 2nd of 2012 was going to be a bad day. I was working for WDRB at the time, and I think a high risk was placed early that morning. And by 1 o'clock that afternoon, we had tornadoes that were developing, severe thunderstorms. That particular storm formed just ahead of the actual low pressure system, something that we mentioned during a previous episode. Those tornadoes really like that warm front. We mentioned that in relation to the legendary Tri-State, which was the documentary that was just released on the 100-year anniversary of that. But that storm also, low pressure, warm front, the tornado gets started right out ahead of it, a favored area for the air to rotate and air to lift. And both of those things are necessary for severe storms, particularly supercells, which go on to produce tornadoes. This particular one, of course, the March 2nd event, a devastating EF4, high-end EF4, that was on the ground for over 50 miles. Now, that brings the path to mind because that same path, very similar path to a tornado that occurred very close to Henryville. It actually missed Henryville, that one just to the south, but on April 3rd, 1974. There was a series of storms that rode through southern Indiana, devastating EF5 that touched down in DePaul, Indiana. That storm affected my family, but it rode all the way up through just north of Borden, went through Pekin, and then ended up hitting Hanover very hard and North Madison very hard before finally lifting. A very similar track to the March 2nd, 2012 Henryville tornado.
Do you feel like that the ingredients were all somewhat similar to make that path possible?
I would say that the April 3rd event, there were some similarities. That the April 3rd event was about 100 times more powerful.
Yeah.
And while on March 2nd of 2012, the Henryville was the big fish. It was the only F4 of the day. On April 3rd of 1974, there were 23 F4s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there were 7 F5s.
Yeah. All right. That is a big differentiator.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you'd like to hear more about Jeremy Kappell, meteorologist, as well as stay connected to any of his documentary projects, film projects, of course, being a film producer, there's several things you can get connected to related to weather there, and have a passion for understanding the past so we can make good decisions about what we do in the future in preparation for storms, and that will definitely get you connected to that. You can find it online. Both his documentaries are available. We'll be right back.